Hello, I'm Peter Junho Sang, founder and CEO of Beyond Form, and welcome to the special series Build It, where I speak to founders and their clients as to how they're building fashion technologies. This series gives you a glimpse into topics such as personal struggles, technical challenges, working in fashion, and more. On this episode, I chat with Ahmed Altaf, CEO of AM Group. I was really looking forward to this episode because AM Group is a knitwear production facility, which is fundamentally very different to a factory that deals with woven garments. My past meant that actually I only really knew about woven factories, so it was very interesting to see how he was talking about how working with a vertically integrated knitwear factory could be advantageous for his clients, and how some of his clients get it wrong when working with a knitwear factory.
To be honest with you, we don't like saying no to the client. If it's someone who understands the effort that we're putting on, understands the psyche of it. Plus, obviously, most of these brands, by the way, we've been working with them for like 20, 22 years. And the thing with us is nobody told me, or nobody told my father to put in this quality system. There hasn't been much where I feel like, okay, that's a very mad. Sometimes, I feel like I said, issues that we have with knits, fabric, like managing that, sometimes they're like, okay, some tolerances are up and down, we have to kind of explain it to them, okay, like this in knits, this is a little hard to it. So I feel like these are little things.
So listeners, I have again with me today Abdul, who we've listened to previously in our previous conversation. We have our special series with WiMetrix, and today we're joined by Ahmed Altaf, who is one of the directors and the CEO of AM Group. Abdul, do you want to say a quick hi to our listeners again?
How are you?
And Ahmed, very nice to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm good.
Looking forward to our conversation. We have yet to have specialists in knitwear speaking on the podcast show, so I think a lot of our listeners will be excited to listen about that. But before we get stuck into the conversation, I want to give some context about where you're located and about the knitwear industry as well. So AM Group is located in Karachi. It is the largest city in Pakistan, and it's the 12th largest in the world, with a population of over 20 million people, according to the 2023 census. So it's a very large city indeed, much bigger than Paris or London. In terms of the value of knitwear in Europe, the imports are estimated at 25.8 billion euros. So it's a huge industry coming into the continent, making it a major apparel sub-segment. According to ITC trademark statistics, in 2022, the European share of total world knitwear imports was as much as 34% compared to 26% for the USA. And that's according to the CBI Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the 2023 study. I can imagine, Ahmed, you export a lot of garments to our continent, to fashion brands here. So I'll be interested to see and hear actually kind of the clients that you work with later on. In terms of knitted fabrics exports from Pakistan, it totaled $48.3 million US in 2023, although in 2022 it was actually much, much higher at $76.2 million US. So it's a significant portion of the exports, and that's according to Trading Economics. So some context there for our listeners. But before we get stuck into the fashion and market side of things, Ahmed, I want to know more about your business journey. You studied supply chain and business. How did you go from that to running a knitwear production facility in Karachi?
Okay, so basically this company, AM Group of companies, we have 5 different units. So the first one was AM Merchandising, which started in 2001. My father started that company, and obviously since I've seen him since my childhood, working textile, I've seen the flair of textile, how much he enjoyed it. So, I've always wanted to be in textile, even before I actually went to university. So my plan was always to get into textile. That's why I've been planning my degrees around that. So, yeah, I studied marketing and supply chain, and as soon as I was done, obviously, actually, I graduated during COVID. So I got lucky and I actually ended up here a lot earlier than I was supposed to. So that's how I ended up starting textile.
And then growing up surrounded by your father as a businessman working in factories, what did that feel like? Was it always a sense of I really need to join the family business, or what did the entrepreneurial mindset come into?
So I used to come. I used to come to the factory even before during my childhood. And I actually did like little internships in different other textile factories. But when I used to come here, and especially when I used to work with my dad, actually he made sure I didn't work with him for the first few years. He made sure I used to work like different kinds of dyeings and different knitting, different processes that he would make sure that I would also actually see, so I would understand what's going on. And it felt like this is something that we that's really important. You know, garments that we wear, the way we look, what quality and everything. I feel like there's so much that goes into it. There's so many people that are behind this entire process. And I feel like that's what made it so special. I feel like garments is something that's, there's always going to be a demand for that.
And then growing up in Karachi, just give some context there to our listeners in the introduction. Very large city. What was it like growing up as a child there? Just give some context to our listeners that may not know the city itself.
Well, it's chaotic. It's huge. I mean, infrastructure is, it's above that. It's all right. But growing up in Karachi, obviously, you have to be very street smart. You have to, kind of like find your own way. You have to figure things out. But everybody's like kind of like just running. They have something to do with it. It's very busy. It's just like the city. Basically, I feel like I'm a reflection of the city as well. I'm always running, always doing something. I always want to just keep moving forward. So I think that was my experience, and that comes from the city actually. So I'm actually very thankful.
That's a very fast-paced city, but they have lovely food. I think he forgot to mention that.
Yes.
Lovely food. Well, one day I'll go over there. So then, in a nutshell, Ahmed, what does AM Group do specifically, and what are the types of brands that you work with?
A group of companies, we specialize in knitted products, and most of the, some of the bigger brands that people know about that we work with are Zara, Pull&Bear, New Balance, Fila, Academy, BCG. These are some of the brands that we work with. So some of these are like retail brands. There's a big portion of our business that goes to college wear, resort wear, varsity wear in US specifically. So that's primarily what we do. We're a completely vertically integrated unit now. We do everything. We do dyeing in house, we do printing in house, we do embroidery in house. We have our own. Almost all the processes are in house now, and we can. I mean, we've expanded in the past few years, and our quality has gone up to about 1 billion pieces per month.
You mentioned there that you're vertically integrated. Some of our listeners not may be familiar with that term. What does that mean, and why is that an advantage to be integrated in such a way?
Okay, so what that means is that each process that happens in making the start right here, 90% of it, actually 100% of it happens in house, except like the trims. And what that does is how that gives me an advantage is that it helps me control each process based on the customer's requirements and to ensure that that process actually happens. For example, one of the biggest elements of being a vertically integrated unit, fundamental of that is having your own dye house. Because the color of the fabric and the fabric properties, a lot of those are controlled in the dye house. So when you have, something like that, right as your own, you can make sure that the quality is better maintained, dyes you're using, chemicals you're using, everything is actually as per the buyer's standard. When you outsource it, sometimes, it's harder to control that kind of level of quality because obviously we're in touch with the customer. We want to make sure the quality of the product is actually top notch and exactly what they're expecting. So when everything's happening in house, we have our own quality systems that ensure that it is actually happening. I think that's one of the biggest things about having a vertically integrated setup. Plus, obviously, it helps with the costs and everything. Those advantages are also there.
I think I think quality and cost is one aspect, but I think what also puts that at an advantage is the speed to market because
Yeah.
the way lead times are changing, brands are focusing more on shorter runs and quicker runs and expecting quicker deliveries. I think that also really helps in that aspect.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of these buyers are moving towards like 45 days lead times. And you need to have your own dining hours, you need to have everything in house to make sure that you can actually meet those targets. Otherwise, it's really tough because then if you're doing everything commercially, then you have to go after them, they have to prioritize things like that. It's a huge
And
hassle.
how long that time was used to be before being
So
45 days?
before it used to be 90 days, then it came down to 75, then it came down to 60 for repeat styles. Now we're talking about 45 days for repeat styles. So it's cut down a lot because obviously fast fashion has gone up like eventually actually.
In a nutshell, if I am working with a vertically integrated factory facility like yours, I can then expect faster lead times because everything is on site and it's easy to push through the orders, efficiencies and qualities because then you can check every stage of that process within the factory. So in a nutshell, it makes sense actually for brands to try to find vertically integrated factories to work with. Just from my past days within production, that wasn't always the case. For example, the knitwear factory that we would work with, they would literally just be doing the confection part of the knitwear side of things. And we would have to get the jersey fabrics, for example, from another fabric mill. And then that can cause quality issues and there might be delays because the fabrics might take, I don't know, a little bit longer than expected to go from the mill to the factory. But it sounds like you can do all of it, which is, of course, a plus point. On the series so far, and I mentioned this in the introduction, we've only spoken to woven factories, woven garments that they deal with. Could you explain to us, though, from a production and foundational perspective, how a knitwear factory is fundamentally different to a woven factory and kind of what are some of the challenges that it can give to a brand?
So fundamentally, obviously, it all starts with the fabric. Say it's fabric, you're talking about like circular knitting. And the difference between those two different kinds of fabrics is like the handling of it, right? So the way it's constructed, that changes everything later on in the supply chain. Basically, I mean, because knit fabrics, there's a lot more variations. The weight can go up, the weight can go down. It's harder to control knit fabric compared to woven fabric because it's a lot more stable. So that is why, that's like one of the biggest differences. And later on, obviously, even the quality systems and the machinery that you get, everything has to be according to that. That's why I feel like you'll see a lot more checkpoints in terms of fabrics in like a knit factory, for example, compared to woven one. Because the fabric is so much more stable, everything, and even in like when it comes to stitching, you need this specific kind of labor to make sure they can actually handle, because some of them are so stretchy, some of them are not. GSM high, low, and that's why you need specific kind of labor to make sure that they can actually handle stitching of such garments as well. I think these are like some of the fundamental differences between those two different kind of factories.
And then when you have a potential new client coming to work with you, do you have to educate them a lot as to, okay, you can't just approach working with us the same way that you do working with a woven factory? Do they always get that, or are there challenges that you need to get through with the customer as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing we always prefer working with the buyers direct, because what that does is in knits, it's all about, I feel like generally it's good to be transparent. Our policy is to make sure the client knows everything, right? Because especially in knits, we don't want any last minute surprises. We don't want any of that. So we actually go through the effort of making sure that they actually know everything that's going on. And we actually make them understand that this is why it's happening. And obviously we want to make sure that we put in 100% effort to kind of like rectify that. But at the same time, we try to like explain it to them that this kind of like, for example, 3% variation in the GSM, things like that. Obviously, there's like certain over the years, there's some market practices as well. I mean, even buyers have understood that, this is a little bit different. So they have some understanding as well. And we actually prefer letting them know that this is what's going on. Sometimes even like mostly beforehand as well. We let them know, like, during a development phase of like any style, we let them know that these are some kind of risks that might happen. So maybe we can go for like an alternate option, or like, if you want to go with that, then, just like give them a clearer picture. And I feel like, there's a lot more awareness now, and they also understand the differences between like its garment and woven factories.
And then, Abdul, you've been working now with AM Group for 3 years. We were just chatting before we started to click record with this factory facility. From a knitwear versus woven, does that affect the WiMetrix system in any way? Like, how can you explain to us a little bit about that?
I think the principles remain pretty much the same. At the end of the day, you want to track man, machine, method, and obviously the material you are tracking. But obviously, in denim has its own complications, and knits has its own complications. Denim is usually, divided in sections in the factories because they have different parts coming together. Is all the garments usually run in single line. So the basics remain the same. Obviously, there are a little bit tweaks when it comes to different industries. But I think I would like to take this opportunity to talk about one thing about AM and the fact that we started working with them somewhere around 3 years ago. So I think this new and young leadership of AM was the very reason that they ended up becoming one of the first customers of WiMetrix in Karachi, at least. And I mean, I really appreciate the vision of Ahmed and AM Group when it comes to maintaining the traceability and transparency across their organization. That these guys just don't hold off from investing in traceability and data driven solutions. So I think that really matters. So you see, with young generation coming in business, and I think Ahmed can add more onto that. That how did he have to convince the other stakeholders in the business for implementing the system? But I think that that's one key area where I really enjoy working with them is their clear-cut vision on maintaining the transparency and traceability through digital systems. So, but please educate us what sort of challenges you had to face internally before onboarding on a journey like this.
I'll tell you from the start. What started was when I actually came, when I joined the factory, that was actually right in the middle of COVID. Actually, it was the first year. So there was a lot of fluctuations. I'm telling you the entire process, how it started, like how it started its journey towards like tech. And we were in the middle of COVID. There was a lot of fluctuations going on with like free. So the first thing I did was actually get an ERP, like a proper ERP that actually covered all the costs and everything. So that was done. A lot of issues with that. Obviously, nobody likes to be taught by the young guy who just came. But I think it was important. What that did was like that helped us understand at the time of shipment. Sometimes, but the demand during COVID was really high. So a lot of buyers are coming in. Okay, it's another order for the same size that you have it in shipped. What that ERP allowed me was to get the cost a lot faster. Okay, to help them, to obviously manage my risk as well because the price fluctuations were insane. Then we started an initiative. Actually started this initiative called AM's Journey Towards Industry 4.0. That's where WiMetrix came. Randomly, we went to this. There was an exhibition, I think, and we went there, and I envisioned a system that will help me control quality and production at the same time. So we went there to check some things out. I thought, I was like, I wish there was machines that just let me know everything. And that was happening in my life. So when I went there, I think Boris was there, and he was giving a demo. I mean, I just looked at it from far. I didn't go in there that much. I looked at it. I understood exactly what was going on, and then I got in touch with them. And I think 3 years ago we started with like 200 machines first, and now we have basically our entire group has those devices. And what that does, the main thing about biometric system is that helps me create transparency throughout all of my lines, throughout my entire system. Before, what used to happen is like, we had people who were like doing inline inspections and like end-line inspections. But when I actually went to them and asked them, okay, like how many garments did you check? And what happened? Tell me exactly, what went wrong. Anybody could just pick up a piece of paper, write the number of the style number, PO, or all that stuff, and then make any kind of report. And I would have to just go on that. And there was no way for me to make sure that these garments were actually checked, or if there was any system that was played, unless and you can always add like another manager over a manager to make sure stuff happens. But I feel like that's not sustainable. So what that system allowed, especially, and my father also had a role to play in this because he's a very quality-centric guy. He'll do anything, make sure that whatever we've committed to the buyer and the quality has to be top. So he is really in for it. And we started with 200 machines. We saw the results. Now we have, and I can actually see the reports in real time. I have people right next to my office doing data analysis at all times, telling me exactly what's going on in factories that are like, even like 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers away from me. And that helps me create some kind of an analysis. I can I manage my labor accordingly, my employees accordingly as well, making sure that if they need some training, or like if they anything, everything that has to happen in real time. Basically, we have to minimize our risks as well. I don't want to find out, buyer shouldn't have to tell me what's going on with my car. As long as it's in my factory, I need to make sure that anything that's shipped is 100% okay. And this system has allowed me.
And how many machines do you have now in the entire group?
So right now we have 1,500 machines. And going forward on the
They have cutting machines and all that separate.
yeah, exactly. Moving on with the Industry 4.0 journey, now what we've done is obviously, so we've taken care of it, alhamdulillah, we've kind of, improved. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, but we've improved on our quality systems and the production. Now we're going towards the resources aspect. I'm working with WiMetrix on the MEMS project, which will help me track down fabric all over my system. Especially one of the biggest issues in working in Karachi is like the resources. Basically, where my factory is, we don't even have a water line. We have to arrange like water tankers. So we have to make sure that whatever resources we have, we manage them well. We don't overuse, we use them efficiently. So now I'm working with them and having this device installed on all of my machines, which will help me track down each fabric roll, each lots. It can help me see the chemical and the dyes and everything that's being used, how much of it has been used, and the gas and all the resources that have been consumed by that process. That helps me with the compliance aspect of it, but I feel like for me personally that's secondary, because we're a part of the generation that actually does care about the environment, and I just want to make sure that we don't actually overuse anything that we don't need to. Like water, we need to conserve, we need to save all these resources to be more sustainable going forward as well. Now it's not just about documentation. I feel like it's really important to survive as well. So you have to make sure that all the resources that are being consumed, are under control.
I liked how Abdul there, Ahmed, said that you were the newer generation of executive management, and that was very much the kickstart of the digital transformation of AM Group. And I think that is kind of what is needed in, within the supply chain, within the production, the world. Quite often, I do have family and stuff outside as well, and quite often they are very traditional. They want to stick to kind of what they know and the process of that they do know. And I do think it takes, not necessarily youth is the answer, but something that comes in with a more modern perspective and a more contemporary view of how things can be done. And the thing that's obviously needed, and obviously in your case, I mean, your proof in the point there that you want to make a little bit different with some of the strategies that you're deploying. But in terms of the certifications, Ahmed, you have many that are linked with the AM Group. Thinking about sustainability, thinking about transparency and traceability, some of those themes you just talked about there. One that really caught my eye was the Walmart Responsible Sourcing Certificate. Obviously, Walmart is a huge company that we all know around the world. How have such brands like Walmart, for example, helped you on your sustainable innovation journey and ambitions?
How they've helped us, obviously, they've given us exact goals. They have given us a clear picture on exactly what they expect from their suppliers of this. And that has obviously helped us as well with, including that in our roadmap as well. Like I said, I've always aspired to be more environmentally friendly myself as well. That's why I want to make the company exactly like that. But these certifications help us stay on track, make sure that, if we're missing out on anything, they can help us, they can guide us. They've given us exact KPIs as well and exact goals as well that we can work with. I think that's one of the biggest things that these certifications have done. And they've also made us, I'm so sorry, they've also made us understand the importance of being sustainable in the future.
In terms of your partnership with WiMetrix, for example, the whole transparency and traceability, how has Abdul and his team helped to feed into your strategy there?
I mean, they have been spot on. They have been here, they've been working with me. They understand. The biggest thing is, especially Abdul. It's hard to find people in Pakistan who can understand the vision. When a lot of these systems, when I talk about the implementation aspect of these systems, that's a whole other conversation. There are kind of issues that we face. So it's rare to find people who actually understand the vision, and that's one of the biggest things about it. So Abdul understood exactly what I was expecting from this system, and he made sure that his team understood that as well, and they gave us results exactly like that. To be honest with you, they've actually I work with a few other tech companies as well, but the kind of what he achieved, it helped me understand, okay, in Pakistan means other tech companies that I'm working with can also achieve the same kind of results.
Thank you for your generous remarks, Ahmed. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It sounds like it's working so far. And then just going back to what I said right at the start of the conversation, over 25 billion euros worth of imports of knitted garments are coming into the European continent. So it's a huge number. Exports are coming from Pakistan. So I think it's really important that Western brands and brands on this side of the world really understand, okay, how are the operations running in Pakistan with the factories there? How are, are they differing? Which ones are being more modern, being more sustainable, and so forth? And it sounds like you really have really integrated that into the core of your business proposition and also your values as well as a factory. So then, some of your clients include Zara, New Balance, Fila. Staying on that subject of being a responsible manufacturer, do they all differ in terms of criteria and what they're looking for in terms of sustainability or ethics? How do you deal with all of these different requirements?
Um, there's In terms of sustainability, I think they're all more or less on the same page. I feel like West and behind on sustainability aspect, but they're also catching up. I think one of the biggest ones that everyone's on board now for is Pakistan Accord. But I feel like the expectations now in terms of being sustainable, I feel like they're more or less the same. There's not a lot of difference.
And do you ever get a potential client and they come at you with so many demands that you don't want to work with them? What have been some of the more challenging things that you've had to deal with clients, without, of course, naming any names?
To be honest with you, we don't like saying no to the client. If it's someone who understands the effort that we're putting into our understands the psyche of it. Plus, obviously, most of these brands, by the way, we've been working with them for like 20, 22 years. And the thing with us is nobody told me or nobody told my father to put in this quality system. I feel like most of the times we're actually ahead of the curve. We have a sense of what's going on in the market. Before our clients tell us to do that, we actually go ahead on it. So to be honest with you, there hasn't been much where I feel like, okay, that's a very unreasonable man. Sometimes, I feel like I said, issues that we have with knits, fabric, like managing that. Sometimes they're like, okay, some tolerances are up and down. We have to like kind of explain it to them. Okay, like this in knits, this is a little hard to achieve. So like, I feel like these are little things. But apart from that, in terms of like certifications, compliance, systems, and all, I have not heard any extreme expectation that we don't already have here. No client of mine told me to put in this quality system. Nobody had those kind of expectations. But obviously we want to make sure that our clients actually get the best. If there is something that can help us improve their product, we want to do it.
So, Ahmed, nobody understands manufacturing better than you. Obviously, you own a factory. You have a vertically integrated setup. What do you think the fashion world needs to accept some changes in order to actually be talking about? In the broader horizon, what do you think are the steps that the fashion industry must take steps towards so that it is actually possible for, like, I should say that it is more feasible for manufacturers to make this entire value chain sustainable?
Yeah. So regarding becoming more sustainable, I feel like we need to start the waste management that's happening on the consumer side. Because I feel like it's not just about the manufacturer becoming more sustainable. It's about this is something that we need to work. Everybody needs to work. So we need to have better policies in terms of like waste management from the consumer side. A lot of brands have this policy of like, return the product and then there has to be some kind of an incentive for the consumer as well to kind of like, make sure that the product doesn't just go to waste. It can be reused. It can be used. And we also need to look more towards like, for example, regenerated yarn. We offer a lot of those solutions as well. But obviously, like the aesthetic is it's slightly a little bit different. So the customer needs to understand that, obviously, if we're going to go toward like something recycled, something regenerated, it's going to be obviously different from something that's just going to be produced from scratch. So I think these are some of the things that we need to more discuss.
So then, final question here is, from your perspective, what do you think fashion factories of the future look like, and how is AM Group going to adapt to those changes?
I'll tell you how I envision AM. I know that there is certain wastages that happen throughout our entire system. Future AM, to me personally, looks like 0% wastage in the entire system. Okay, that obviously helps us become more sustainable. It's good for cost. So, for example, in the process of dyeing, there's a certain number of wastage and, all of those things, they have to be minimized. Tech has a huge role to play in that. When we talk about a system like WiMetrix, obviously we're managing our risks a lot better. We're making sure the garments don't go to waste so easily. So we're talking about better accountabilities. A lot like, we're talking about 0% wastage at this point. I feel like that's what the future is. And I'm currently working towards that as well, gradually I'm getting there. So,
That's a very ambitious goal,
yeah.
Ahmed. It's not easy to have zero waste, especially in fashion, but I wish you all the best with trying to solve that huge problem for the industry. I just want to finish off this conversation, Ahmed, with a quick fire round of questions. So, just a little bit of fun to end off our conversation. The first answer that comes to your head, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Favorite type of garment to wear, knitted or woven?
Knitted for sure.
Well, I thought you'd say that.
You could say we're very knitted right now. So.
Yeah, you're both very knitted. Favorite type of client to work with?
I think my favorite type of client to work with is somebody who understands that the factory itself is also trying to improve itself, and they appreciate that. I feel like it's really important, and because they think about the final consumer as well. It's not just about like price cutting and like getting the market share. It's also about the end consumer as well, and they understand what we're doing on our supplier side to make sure that the end consumer gets a great product. So I think that's my favorite type of client to work with.
You need more of those, basically.
Yeah.
The hardest thing about being a CEO of a garment factory?
The hardest thing, I think it would have to be, especially because my experiences have been in Pakistan. I feel like it's a lot to do with the implementation of new processes, of new concepts, of new ideas, and making sure that your staff and your people understand the value of why we're trying to do that. One of the biggest issues that I faced, for example, with WiMetrix, and all the other systems that I got here, was the actual implementation and creating that culture of like making sure that the product is good and making them understand why we're doing this, why we want to save more water, why a system that helps us control and make better garments for end consumer, and just value that. I feel like that's one of the hardest things about being a CEO, like to make sure that gets implemented in your.
Name the best thing about working with WiMetrix.
Like I said, they understood my vision and they helped me get there. I think that's the biggest thing. I can't stress enough how hard it is to find somebody like that in Pakistan who understands from a tech perspective. Because it's all about, for example, we have a spreader machine as well that automatically lays the fabric. It's just a machine that just automatically lays the fabric. And like, I had 5 people. That was something that I brought to kind of control the shrinkage and everything. And like, I had 5 people right off the bat tell me, this is not applicable. things like that. So when you get to hear so many of those things, I mean, if I a guy like Abdul, he understands your vision. I think that's the biggest advantage of it.
And then finally, one piece of advice for any brand, any professional within fashion looking to work with a Pakistani manufacturer.
I think the biggest piece of advice is you're working with the prices with Pakistani manufacturers. It's really important to have like some kind of a comparison to see where the market stands. Or if there's somebody who is like completely out of the radar, just really look into their systems, really look into, their factories, maybe send someone to actually have a look at what's going on over there. Just to kind of make sure, because I feel like, especially in knits, there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways to kind of like meet a pricing target, but it comes at a cost of like for the end consumer, and that's not okay. So I feel like the biggest advice is just to make sure that whoever you're working with, look at their systems and see actually like, what kind of quality systems they have to dyeing and the process and everything that's going on. Just to make sure that you get what you're looking for the price that you have. I mean, what that they're offering.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really insightful talking about knitwear and your factory.
So,
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for the time and your thoughts. I think this is a great conversation for anyone who wants to have an idea about the knitwear industry, and especially in Pakistan, and especially who wants to get inspired.
so much.